Okay, the last time we were reading about Caitlin and 9/11, and now we're back to Martin. We're mid-chapter with Martin. 2 days later, at breakfast, another assembly was called. This was unexpected. We all started chattering in the dining hall about what it could be. Someone must be in trouble, Rabbit said. We filed into the assembly area quietly. Mr. Muzawazi was standing at the front with his hands clasped in front of him, his head nodded down, as if in deep prayer. Once we all had taken our places, he spoke. "Students, I have troubling news," he said. "There was a terrorist attack on the United States." A ripple of sharp breaths and "How is that possible?" exclamations went through the rows of students. "Two planes struck the Twin Towers in New York City," Mr. Muzawazi continued. "A third hit the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. And according to news I read this morning, a fourth plane crashed in Pennsylvania. I had never heard of the Twin Towers, though Mr. Muzawazi explained that they represented the financial capital of the United States. We had all heard of the Pentagon, and were shocked to learn that people had died as a result of this tragedy. But what alarmed me the most was the plane crash in Pennsylvania. That was where Caitlin and her family lived. What if the crash was near Hatfield? What if they had been hurt? With each new question, my throat constricted. I had to make sure Caitlin was okay. But how? A letter took 2 weeks to get there. I shot my hand into the air. Mr. Muzawazi stopped mid-sentence, surprised to be interrupted. "Excuse me, sir," I said, "but do you know where in Pennsylvania?" He shook his head. "I'm afraid not, Martin," he said. "All we know is that it was in the middle of a field, and everyone on the plane died." As awful as the news was, it made me feel better. Caitlin would have been in school and not on a plane. I could breathe again. For the days that followed, everyone at school talked about the attacks. Not too long thereafter, we learned that the U.S. and Britain were imposing sanctions on Zimbabwe, which was still involved in the Congo. While this was not directly related to September 11th, the ripple effects of a changed world were being felt everywhere. The U.S. was targeting any nation that abetted terrorists. That included my country. Still, I wasn't worried about the global consequences. I wondered, would these sanctions impact my relationship with Caitlin? I prayed every night that would not be so. I also prayed for news from Caitlin, and was relieved to return home from the Christmas break to a letter that said she and her family were fine. As always, her words put all my fears to rest. I wanted to offer her comfort with mine. They were still all I had. "Dear Caitlin and family," I wrote, "I'm so sorry for the terrorist activities that rocked America and led to the loss of innocent lives. We Zimbabweans join you in this period of sorrow." I asked if she had heard of the sanctions and then added, "I pray that all these potential problems and economic tensions between U.S. and Zimbabwe will not affect our deep, strong relationship." There were so many things I wanted to share with her, namely, that I was considering medical school seriously. Caitlin had already reached out to a few places for me, and then my headmaster even gave me a list of more top schools to pursue. I included several in that same letter. If you could please contact New York University School of Medicine, Stanford University School of Medicine, University of Washington School of Medicine, University of Michigan School of Medicine on my behalf. I knew this was a lot, so I added, "I'm sorry for giving you such a huge task. I know it is time-consuming and may be boring. Maybe you don't have to do the whole task in one day. You may do it bit by bit. That is when you are free and feel like you want to do the tasks. So do not strain yourself. I thank you in advance for your help." I sent the letter right before Christmas, and was amazed to receive one from her only a few days later. Our missives had crossed somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, I thought as I ripped open the envelope. Folded in between the pale pink stationery was a piece of silver. It looked like a very thin candy bar. I unwrapped it to find a $20 bill. I shook my head in disbelief. I had forgotten to ask for money to secure a passport. I needed one now that I was planning to study abroad. Somehow, my friend from so far away must have already known that. This was a sign. Then we have Caitlin, January 2002. Everything changed after September 11th. The attacks were proof that there were people who truly hated America. That was a new feeling. It was terrible, but it made me think hard about what it meant to be an American. I shared those thoughts with Martin in my next letter. The terrorist attacks affected every American, but our country is so great because we all stuck together in this time of need. We stand behind our government and trust that the terrorists will be brought to justice. The words just flowed out of me, as if the experience opened a new valve in my brain and heart. I hadn't heard about the sanctions Martin mentioned in his letter, but nothing could alter my feelings towards him. I made a point of that, writing, "Rest assured, the political crisis between Zimbabwe and the U.S. will not affect our friendship." If anything, I felt more indebted to Martin than ever. He had already changed the way I thought about the world, and now he was having an impact on what I wanted to be in it. Ever since he wrote me about going to medical school, I started thinking about becoming a nurse. I told my parents over dinner one night. They were thrilled. "You'll always have a job," my dad said. "And you have the right disposition," my mom added. "Plus, if Martin goes to medical school, we can work together," I said. We all laughed at this thought in a "wouldn't that be amazing" way. Later that evening, my mom asked me to sit down with her in the kitchen. "I've been thinking," she said. "Your father and I want to help Martin as best we can, but we can't afford to send him to college here in the States." "I know that, Mom," I said. "But he won't be able to get here without our help," she continued. "You have so much on your plate, I don't want you to worry about helping Martin getting into college as well. Since I'm only going to be substitute teaching this year, I'd like to help Martin find a scholarship." "That's the best news ever," I said. She smiled and then whipped out the letter she had drafted to Martin earlier that day, in which she detailed the 6 universities she had already contacted about international scholarships. "I didn't want to send this without your okay," she explained. "You have my full support, Mom," I said, "but I still want to help." She stuck out her hand and said, "Deal." We shook on it. I had already started to reach out to medical schools for Martin, and that process inspired me to make another appointment with my guidance counselor to talk about my own options. I told her I was thinking about nursing, and she asked if I had heard of the dual enrollment program. I had not. "You only need to take homeroom and physical education next year in order to finish all your high school credits," she explained. "So why not start college at the same time? You can double up, get a head start." I was getting sick of high school and loved the thought of getting a head start in college. "Where?" I asked. "Montgomery County Community College offers all the prerequisite classes for a nursing degree," she said. "Your grades are good enough to go, and you don't need any standardized testing to get in." "You mean I don't have to take the SATs?" I said. I went out with Damon the night before the PSATs and bombed them. I was dreading the SATs. "You would still take them," she said, "but they won't matter." "How can I sign up?" I said. And now we have Martin, June 2002. I was surprised to receive a letter from Caitlin's mom. In it, she offered to help me navigate the complicated American college admission process. I was so happy to hear this. It was further proof that Caitlin was not the only angel in this family. Anne asked me if I had ever heard of the SATs. I had, in fact, because my good friend Wallace had taken them earlier that year. He, too, was planning to go to school in the States that September. Wallace lived in the dorm next to me, but was always in my room because he was close friends with my roommates, Bonaventure and Cornelius. We called Wallace Loeb, short for Lobengula, a warrior who fought the white colonialists when they invaded in the 1800s. Wallace was very buff. He worked out all the time, lifting weights, but he was also very calm, quiet, and reserved. He never said much unless you asked him direct questions, which was why I didn't learn sooner that he was going to the U.S. to study. When I did find out, I started grilling him. That's how I found out his brother was already attending college in Canada and that his parents owned a bed and breakfast in Victoria Falls, where he grew up. Despite his family's wealth, Wallace was humble, not showy like so many of our other classmates. I asked him one day why that was so, and he explained that his father was the first in his family to go to university. and that many of his relatives lived in the rural areas and were even worse off than my own parents. He understood poverty, even though he had not experienced it firsthand. He never judged me for mine. Instead, he inspired me to be the first to escape in my family, like his father had. When I received Anne's letter, I asked Wallace where I could take these SATs. You sign up for them on the internet, he explained. This was yet another reason I needed access to a computer. Anne had already mentioned that all the information I needed for college was online, and she had recently asked if there was any way I could communicate with her via email to save time, as it took a month for letters to get back and forth. There was an internet cafe in Mutare, but I wouldn't be able to use that until I went home for a break. I was getting frustrated, but then Wallace told me that Mr. Muzawazi had a computer and online access in his office. I made an appointment to meet with Mr. Muzawazi, who was pleased to hear I was pursuing university in the States. Terrific news, Martin, he said. That is why I'm here, I explained. I'm having trouble finding all the necessary information. I need access to the internet. I see, he said. And so I was wondering if I could borrow your computer from time to time, I said. This was a lot to ask. I had to offer a compelling reason. I'd only use it after hours to correspond with my pen pal and her mother, as they are helping me gather material, I explained. Other students have managed to get into university abroad without a computer, Martin, Mr. Muzawazi responded. This was going to be a hard bargain. Yes, I understand, sir, but those students come from wealthy families, I said. I will only be able to do this if I find an international scholarship. Mr. Muzawazi remained silent. Caitlin's mother said she'd help me, but she needs to be able to get information quickly, I explained. Okay, Mr. Muzawazi said. Plus, I must register for SATs online, I explained. Wallace told me this is the only way. I'll talk with my secretary, he said finally, and we'll arrange to get you a key. You may use my office after hours. Fantastic, I said. I held back from hugging Mr. Muzawazi. He was not a touchy-feely guy, but after 5 years of waiting for letters to cross the Atlantic Ocean, this meant immediate access to Caitlin and her family. You can start this evening after dinner, Mr. Muzawazi said, but do not let word out. No one is to use my office computer. This is our deal, okay? Absolutely, sir, I said. You have my word. And you have mine, Mr. Muzawazi said. I left his office elated. Later that evening, I returned to Mr. Muzawazi's office. The key was left for me with a note from his secretary explaining how to open the door and how to turn on the computer. I had only used a computer twice before in my lifetime, to type letters. Both times the machine was already turned on. I walked up to the large beige box on Mr. Muzawazi's desk. Wires sprouted out of its back side. That's where I found the power switch and watched in amazement as the screen buzzed to life. A row of numbers and letters appeared at the top corner, as if the machine was speaking its own language. Then a box appeared asking for a passcode. I typed in the secret word that the secretary had supplied for me, writing in neat capital letters on the school stationery. Next, I followed her specific instructions for getting online and accessing the school's only email account. Anne had sent her email address, and Caitlin's as well. I decided to send each one a message as an experiment. I had never sent an email before, and the concept that they would receive it in moments after I hit send was something I could not begin to grasp. Hi, Caitlin, I typed in the green screen. It's me, Martin. My headmaster has allowed me to use his personal computer. Isn't this exciting? Please respond to this address so I know you received this. Your forever friend, Martin. I hit the send button and the message disappeared with a whooshing sound. I worried that it may have done just that, disappeared. I sent Anne the same email. And then I started to research SATs in Harar. I finally found the website and learned that I needed a credit card in order to register. I didn't have one, nor know anyone who did. I made a note of it. Anne would know what to do. Then I started to look up other requirements for African students to go to the United States for school. 2 hours later, I had 2 pages of notes and a heart brimming with hope. And that's where we will stop for right now. I hope you're enjoying it.